Hi, everyone. This is Acytua-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. It is Sunday, January 26th, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Jupiter-Mars Antiscia that is coming up in the next couple of days. I am doing this after initially talking about the Jupiter-Mars Antiscia last week. I did a video with some final reflections on Saturn and Pluto, and at the beginning of that video, I talked about the upcoming Antiscia between Jupiter and Mars. I thought I would do a refresher today on the topic because, unfortunately, we have a glaringly obvious example of the transit in the headlines today, at least in the United States, which is the sudden and very tragic death of basketball legend Kobe Bryant, who just died along with his daughter in a helicopter accident. I was out with my daughter shopping. We were just getting a few things at Bed Bath & Beyond, a great way to spend a Sunday afternoon. And I was with my daughter and just reflecting on, how nice it was to spend time with my daughter. And I got the messages pulling into my driveway and just checking my notifications on my phone before I turned the car off. And at the top was Kobe Bryant dies in a helicopter accident. I was like, oh my God, And then I looked out at the story a little bit later. Someone on social media alerted me to the fact that his daughter was with him. So it was just kind of an impactful moment for me, thinking about just having been with my daughter and in the vehicle and things like that. There are so many things going on in the world. So, in some ways, I don't want to take. I'm not getting. I'm not here just to be shocked and crazy about someone dying. People die all the time, all over the world, everywhere. What I'm here to do today is, given this kind of tragic news, whenever someone who's kind of a legendary figure in any field, whether it's science or politics or art or cinema or, sports in this case, passes, sometimes the passing of such a figure will exemplify or will sort of illustrate the astrology of the moment. So I want to show you what that is again, just so you can refresh on it. We'll talk about how it's applicable to us personally as well. And I'll just refresh you on the predictions that I made last week about this particular transit. So here is the transit perfecting, as we speak. Here's the presence of Mars at about 16 degrees of Sagittarius. And we see Jupiter at about 12 degrees of Capricorn. When the two planets' degree totals add up to 30, then they're in an official Antiscia with one another. So I explained the concept of Antiscia in the previous video, so that if you don't know what it is and you want to know how it works technically, you can go back to that final reflections on Saturn-Pluto video in my archives and watch the first 15 minutes and you'll get a good feeling for what this is. In that analysis, what I talked about was this. Mars is currently in the sign of Jupiter and is moving into an Antiscia with Jupiter, its host, but Jupiter is in Capricorn, which is the sign of its fall. Not only that, but it's with the south node of the moon, which tends to in ancient astrology, bring a little bit of a malefic influence. It's of the nature of Saturn. So Jupiter's not in great shape right now in the chart. But here we have this forming Antiscia between the two of them. Now, here's a way of thinking about how ancient astrologers interpreted things, interpreted signs and omens like this. We would say Mars is a house guest in Sagittarius, which means Mars wants Mars kinds of things and Mars represents Mars kinds of things. For example, war, violence, conflict, accidents, injuries, competition, bravery, courage, all Mars-ruled things. Cutting, slicing, even chemistry to a certain extent, mathematics, anything that's really analytical and incisive mentally could be a Mars thing. So Mars represents that range of things. And Mars wants to do Mars kinds of things, but it can only get whatever the host is willing to provide it with or can provide it with. So in this case, Mars in Jupiter's sign says, I've got to get something from Jupiter. For example, with Mars in Jupiter's sign, you might say, I want victory. Mars likes victory, like athletes and warriors and victory, Mars-ruled things. Then we say, Jupiter, a planet that's also associated with abundance and growth, and it sort of magnifies and makes things bigger, will provide for big or legendary victories, something like that. Okay, so as this Antiscia is forming, just a few days ago, LeBron James, very famous athlete, Mars, surpassed Kobe Bryant's all-time scoring record, which puts him into third on the list, if I remember the headline correctly. If you listen to my videos, you know that I have something of a private sports junkie streak in me. So this was a perfect expression of the Antiscia in terms of a great athletic figure losing his status by someone surpassing him. So the athlete gets a fall in Jupiter. So he falls down as someone surpasses him. On the other hand, you also have the idea of LeBron James surpassing one of the greatest all-time athletes, Kobe Bryant, in scoring. Seems fantastic, right? Except for 2-3 days later, the guy he surpasses dies in a helicopter accident. Right? So it's this twist of tragedy. And that's the thing that I talked about last week, is that whether it's a military leader, a religious or political official, a guru or a teacher, or even an athlete or a military leader, or a great military figure, something Mars Jupiter, right? Which basically says, here's something great, big, and Mars-like, and it's about to take a serious tumble. There can be a mixture of victory and fall, or serious humiliation, defeat, etc. We have a president right now in an impeachment trial, right? And the idea that something could come to a head in that trial could be indicated by this. It could also indicate, for what I said, was the potential, it sneaks up on you because Antiscias are sort of secretive in nature. An aspect like this is rather secretive in nature. So it often kind of comes out of the blue, and you don't necessarily, I mean, it's a lot of times any kind of accident or tragedy or whatever is sort of unexpected, but this has that feeling of potential secretiveness behind it, where there's something, it sneaks up on you. Now, in the sky right now, Mars is also in a square to Neptune. That adds to the intensity of what we're dealing with, which is essentially that there's potentially some really hard stuff happening around Mars-like things right now, in addition to Mars being potentially served up by a fall in Jupiter, which can really lead to Mars's downfall. Mars is hitting a square to Neptune, which can also sort of dissolve Mars. But the interesting thing about Neptune here is that Mars will also be now memorialized, and he's essentially put into the stars now as this incredible athlete who died incredibly young, I think 41 years old. And he's like up there with Michael Jordan in terms of like all-time greats. So that's a powerful example of the Antiscia at work right now, where again, like one of the more mundane predictions that we could make based on this would be the downfall of religious, spiritual, political, or even athletic or martial figures. Because of the reception, especially, remember, Mars can only get what Jupiter can give, and Jupiter can only serve up fallen, somewhat difficult stuff. Maybe there's a silver lining a little bit in it because Jupiter's Jupiter, but it's still this idea of something that's fallen. And yeah, it's an incredible, in the sports world today is, it's very tragic. For many people around the world, they don't care about sports at all. So please don't get me wrong in trying to overstate the importance of this event. The reason I think I'm personally excited by it, and I don't mean in a good way, just that I have some sense of, I guess, shock and wonder at the event, is that this was something that I specifically last week in my classes, in my YouTube, said, I think this aspect is, going to sneak up on people, because this aspect is really strong between two slow moving planets, and the reception is pretty intense, meaning the reception really points to more difficult events. So yeah, that's the explanation of where that one kind of, you could say astrologically, how that's showing up right now. But in terms of some of the more personal ways of interpreting the transit, Mars and Jupiter moving into an Antiscia, which, by the way, it will happen very shortly because we've got Mars almost at 16 degrees. And once Mars gets to about 17 degrees, just within the next couple of days, they'll be in perfect Antiscia, but they're already within the 3-degree application range that ancient astrologers looked at. It would not be surprising to see more events like this. Unfortunately, like in the next few days. I mean, this may take the cake in terms of like the big tragic headline of someone famous sort of, dying or passing, or there being some downfall or humiliation or something like just, something very textbook like that. That's the big one, but you usually see a few. And obviously I'm not always up on, everything happening in the world news. I'm not a big news junkie. So this one just happened to catch my attention. I thought, wow, that is pretty spot on with what we talked about last week. At any rate, the other thing that you can watch for is, just being careful in general when Mars and Jupiter get together for the potential of sort of militarism, this sense of being enthused, but also almost like, for example, like steroid scandals, or when Lance Armstrong's medals were stripped because of doping scandals. That's very much like this Mars Jupiter configuration, where the potential to sort of overdo something and have that overdone aspect make you into some kind of fool, or like, it's the guy who lifts up the couch trying to impress everyone and ends up throwing out his back. You know what I mean? So be careful of that complex right now around us. The sort of pride comes before a big fall type of situation. The other thing that can happen is, of course, we can just be sort of more zealous about something than we should be, and it can lead to our downfall, or it can hurt or harm someone else. So we have to be really mindful about that. The other thing is, of course, that anytime that Jupiter and Mars get together, our efforts or our plans or our sense of, needing to, Mars likes to get things done. And there can be a sense in which, I don't know if you've had one of these days, it's like Alexander in the horrible, no good, very bad day, where you really try to get a lot done and then it somehow just all falls apart. Maybe there's a silver lining somewhere in that kind of story or that kind of day with Jupiter, but you do have to be careful about, like, I'm going to do this big, huge thing right now and really try to push for it, because oftentimes there'll be with the Antiscia to Jupiter, Jupiter disposing of Mars, and Jupiter in its fall, Jupiter will serve up some sense of collapse, failure, difficulty, hardship for Mars. Or the other way around, which is that, there can be some way in which the big plan or the big Jupiterian thing that you think is so great or good will be really frustrated if you push too hard. So that's something to watch for. That's on the personal level. But I wanted to make this video because, it's actually, like, if there's anything that makes me feel like there is some sanity in the world, whether it's a famous legendary basketball player passing, or whether it's something happening in another country, or it's wildfires in Australia, or it's global climate change, or whatever the thing is, it gives me some peace to know that you can see these events reflected in the unfolding of the heavens. It makes me think two things. One, that there is meaning and divine presence and intelligence and guidance with us at all times. And that's reassuring. Two, it also gives me the feeling that karma is real, and therefore our choices and our responsibilities in life are so real. I mean, it's so simple and stupid. And I know a lot of people watching this probably don't care about basketball at all, or Kobe Bryant. I'm not like a big Kobe Bryant fan or anything. I don't even watch basketball. But I was moved by the fact that I was in my car with my daughter, driving and reflecting on how nice it is to have dad-daughter time. And when this happened, I don't take that as just a coincidence. I say, okay, sometimes life is short and sweet, and what can I do to really stay present and make sure I'm making choices within the karmic reality that I'm living in, because our choices do matter. So that's a good reminder that astrology is always giving us as well. It's not just, wow, isn't it amazing that these fated things can be predicted, but also, isn't it amazing that there's this divine intelligence with us and that our choices also matter? What an interesting story, though. Think about that. Jupiter, Mars, Antiscia. His record is surpassed publicly. It's a very big news story in the sports world, because it's a record, that takes extreme talent to be able to pass in this particular field of activity, right? It's surpassed by LeBron James, who's now playing for the Lakers, Kobe Bryant's former team. And just days after he surpasses his record, he dies in a helicopter accident with his daughter. So many other stories and other reflections, and I try to, I apologize if me using an illustration from the sports world feels, so I know I always will get some people being like, come on, there's so many other things going on in the world. So I hope that this, regardless, serves as an interesting example of astrology at work, and reminds us that, life is precious, and it's amazing that legendary people also you can accomplish so much and achieve so much fame and happen in an instant. You can just be gone. I take that into consideration as well. So at any rate, I hope you all are having a good weekend. Lighter topics ahead. Hopefully it's a new moon. There's lots to be excited about in this new moon cycle with the new moon square to Uranus. We talked about that the past couple of days. So I think, we can be upbeat, but I do think, I had a feeling this Mars Jupiter Antiscia could be a little rocky. So, careful of the Superman heroics right now, because pushing a little too hard can trip us up, I think, right now. So that's what I've got. I hope you guys have a great Sunday, and I look forward to talking to you guys more this week about more upcoming astrology transits. Take care. Bye.